Our next question coming from Erica. Mr. Biss getting the first chance to respond this time, Erica.
Our coming primaries have a record number of Latino on the ballots, but none of you have chose a running mate from this community. What is your strategy to include the voice of Latinos in your administration, and what are the names of specific people that you're going to surround your administration with, or organizations that you're currently working with?
Thank you for the question. I've been proud to have endorsements from Latino leaders like Alderman Roberto Maldonado and Senator Omar Aquino, who have been absolutely focal points of our campaign and our strategy, and to spend significant amounts of time in the Latino community because of the partnership I've had with the community over the course of a number of years, working closely, for example, with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights on a series of battles, fighting for years to pass the Trust Act, which we finally were able to enact into law this past summer, taking that first step to have Illinois be a welcoming state for immigrants. But there's so much work left to be done, strengthening this Trust Act, working on stronger municipal ordinances. There will not be a governor who is a closer friend of the Latino community than I, and I look forward to carrying on that work.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. Dr. Marshall.
Well, I apologize. I really don't know that many, and I don't have any on my staff. If I'm elected, I will try to do my best I can to appoint Hispanics. My plan, by the way, speaking of Hispanic people, my plan of dividing the state up and making Chicago its own state will help minorities greatly because they will form such a large percentage of the population. African Americans will be 25% of this new state. Hispanics will be 23%. That's an enormous amount of power, and you can use that power to solve your problems.
All right. Mr. Hardiman?
Yeah, my initial choice for my running mate, his name is Charlie Farrell. He's a Mexican-American young man, but he decided not to run. And then Patricia Aves, she's my running mate right now. But for those who do not know, I've done an extensive amount of work in the Latino-American community. I've worked in Little Village, Pilsen, the back of the yards, Humboldt Park, Logan Square, Waukegan, all across the board. We have Latino staff working for us right now. And what I plan to do is make sure we have a very diverse administration. There are a lot of issues that the Latino community is faced with, and I plan to fix some of those conditions as well. I'm African-American, but my name is Tio. It means uncle in Spanish, so I'm the uncle of all Latino people here in Illinois as well.
All right. Thank you, Mr. I won't say Uncle Harding. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. We'll move on.
I love that question. When I first came to Chicago, I was welcomed by the folks at El Valor and volunteered there for about a decade. I'd look to people like Ray Gonzalez, who's there to help guide me as I build out an administration that looks like the state itself. I'd look to people like Rick Estrada, Metropolitan Family Services, who I served with on the board of the University of Illinois. People like Chuy Garcia, who I hope will be our newest congressman from the city of Chicago. And I'm delighted today to have in the audience Dolores Huerta, one of the great civil rights leaders who helped pioneer the use of boycotts as an economic tool to make sure that our labor laws in the United States reflect the values that we want everywhere.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Pritzker.
Well, we have terrific organizations all across the state of Illinois representing the Latino and Latina community. I am so proud to have the endorsement in this race of Congressman Luis Gutierrez and of Alderman Gil Villegas and Alderman Danny Solis and Alderman George Cardenas and our comptroller, Susana Mendoza. We have talent in our organizations like Resurrection Project and the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights. I am very proud to have put forward a plan for job creation in the Latino community and for protecting immigrant rights. So incredibly important that this state remain a welcoming state for immigrants and that we stand up against Donald Trump and his attempts to take away our DACA recipients' certification.
Thank you, Mr. Pritzker. Mr. Diber.
Yes, I said from day one that my administration would reflect multiracial, multigender, and that I was very open to Latinos being part of my administration. I interviewed some when I was seeking a lieutenant governor, was not successful in getting a running mate. But today, I think that there's an understanding amongst Latinos in Chicago. I joined Alderman Ray Lopez for the groundbreaking today of a community health center, and he was very welcoming, and I think that they know that I'm an individual that has great interest in their community, and I'd be very receptive to them being part of my administration.
All right, thank you very much. Gentlemen, now is the time I'm going to ask each one of you to clarify, or perhaps even to expand upon something that you've already said earlier in this debate. I want to focus on the state budget situation, since it is so critical and affects all the services and, of course, what people are paying out of their pockets as well. Mr. Kennedy, I'm going to start with you. You mentioned the out-of-state tax. Some people might refer to it as the Florida tax. I think they're referring to Chicagoans or Illinoisans who spend an awful lot of time in Florida, but and as a result, don't attempt to pay taxes here in Illinois, or explain that to me.
So if LeBron James plays in LA, he pays taxes in California, income tax the day he plays. When he goes to New York, he pays income tax in New York. When I worked for a publicly traded company, when I'd go to New York, I paid taxes in New York that day. When I went to LA, I paid income tax in California that day. Our state doesn't have that tax. That allows people who claim that they live in Florida, and you don't have to move there for very much time, to continue to have jobs in Illinois, to earn income here and not pay their fair share of the income tax.
So you're not necessarily referring to Illinois residents who spend a good deal of time in Florida but gain some income from Illinois?
People who pretend that they live in another state and continue to earn income here.
All right. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Mr. Biss, I want to then turn to you now. And again, we're talking about the budget situation. I know you said that the efforts you see do not involve necessarily cutting programs to a great degree, but there are many people who might say we have to cut somewhere. We can't find the revenue that we need to bring this state back into a solvency situation. What would you say to that?
I would say that the way to cut is not to look at the spreadsheet of the budget and reduce a number and pretend you've solved a problem when in fact you've just shifted a cost somewhere else, when in fact you've closed down a mental health facility somewhere and created more problems for somewhere else. The way to cut the budget is to fix the way the government is run. We have a system in Illinois where the government is full of little pockets that are isolated from the rest of the government. Those pockets will be controlled by a particular person, perhaps for their financial benefit, perhaps for their political benefit, and that's why our government often feels inefficient to people. If we want to cut the budget in a responsible and humane way, the way to do it is to fix the way the government is structured, not to go after services that people in Illinois badly need and rely upon.
Thank you, Mr. Biss. I'm going to turn to Mr. Pritzker now. As we've kind of established here, but maybe people don't know, in order to accomplish a progressive or graduated tax in the state of Illinois, you need a constitutional amendment to do it. It's not an easy process. We've seen attempts to do this on other matters as well. So how would you accomplish this? In what period of time could you accomplish it? Who are you going to turn to rally the people to get behind this?
Well, as you note, I am actually running with a progressive income tax as an important part of my platform. I think that's critical if we're going to get a constitutional amendment. And we need to pass a progressive income tax because it'll help us pay for our schools. It'll help us lower local property taxes, which are so unfair to the middle class and those striving to get to the middle class. They pay the highest rates of local property taxes. In order to get it done, we need to not only run on it, but also make sure that we're helping others get elected who believe in a progressive income tax up and down the ticket. We need state reps and state senators to vote for it. And in the 2 years that it'll take to get done, we can have an artificial implementation of a progressive income tax by, it's really a Massachusetts model. It's the idea is raise the exemptions for the middle class, and you can raise the overall rate and thereby get an artificial.
I need to stop you on that, but I think we understand the exemption. But thank you for going into that explanation. I'm going to turn to Mr. Hardiman now, and I know the progressive tax is part of your platform as well. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but it includes, depending upon the income level, and maybe these are higher income people, up to a 10% tax on income. Is that correct?
Exactly. For far too long, the wealthy people in the state of Illinois have been getting away without paying their fair share of taxes. So what we propose is a 1 to 10% graduated scale. If you're making $35,000 or less, you pay 1 to 2% taxes. If you're making $100,000 to maybe $250,000, you jump to 3 to 4%. If you like at a range where you're $250,000 to maybe $750,000, you should be paying like 5 to 7%. And if you're making $1 million to a few $1 billion, you pay 8 to 10% taxes. That way we can raise a much needed $3 billion of new revenue here in the state of Illinois that can really work to help boost the economy.
You think you can sell people on a 10% tax, even at incomes of $1 million or more?
Well, it's all about, this is the thing, it's all about the will of the people. It's about the will of the people. As governor, I have a history of organizing people, so what I would do is just really push and organize around this issue of the progressive tax and make it a reality by organizing millions of people here in the state to make that happen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Diber, I'm going to turn to you. I know you mentioned as part of your plan would be to refinance this debt and perhaps re-amortize it out over a longer period of time. I'm not sure exactly if that's the plan fully. Obviously, you have an education background. You're concerned about funding for education. Bring it all around and bring it into focus as to how this would work.
Well, here's what I've said, that over a period of time, let's say we had no tax increase, with the increase from 3.75 to 4.95%, we have gained and will gain near $2 billion of revenue, as was exercised when the tax increase happened from 2010 to 14. So we know that the revenue growth is going to be there. And what I have said is this, is that if we amortize the debt over a period of time, I believe in 4 years, I can pay the interest and pay the principal to pay off the $9 billion of unpaid bills.
In 4 years, you think you can accomplish that?
I sure can.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. And let's see. Did I miss somebody along the way? Oh, Dr. Marshall, forgive me. And you told us to put our seatbelts on, so I want to make sure I've got mine on right now. We're talking about dividing up the state of Illinois, dissolving the current state, and creating 3 separate states. I know you've said that it would be basically the city of Chicago, and then Chicago suburbs, and then the rest of downstate. Okay, let's start first of all with the mountain of debt that we're facing and how on earth that would be divided up between those 3 entities as to whether it be per capita or whether it's just land mass, or how would you do this?
Well, first of all, a pox on all your houses. I'm against it. The progressive income tax is a ripoff. It's a tax on people who are doing well. And where do these people live? They live in the suburbs. So to me, a progressive income tax is a tax on the suburban people, plus your upper class people in Chicago. Now, for dividing up the wealth, it could be done on the basis of family income. You could calculate the total family income for Chicago. If they make up 33% of family income throughout the state, they would get 33% of the bills, the debts, and pensions, or whatever. You could do it like that.
All right, Dr. Marshall, thank you.